All right, we are live, and welcome back to another special edition of the O Bro Show, a show where two brothers with the last name of O host a show, and that was your intro. We are welcome today. Thank you. We are welcome today by an esteemed guest, an expert on all things politics, a political commentator and influencer, Jessiah from Pondering Politics. Give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. Just to clarify, Josh and I are the brothers. Seth is the influencer. Welcome to the show, Seth. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what's up, fellas? It's good to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Yeah. We've had some discourse over Twitter. I've consumed some of your takes. Some of them are pretty agreeable, and some of them are less so.
Egregious, perhaps. Some are egregious.
Yes. No.
Yeah.
That's what makes it fun, though. And so Seth and I are two young guys. We're two young brothers engaging in the political space. And we have interviewed the likes of P.F. Jung already, which you know.
Well, fellas, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate this. I appreciate the invitation. I mean, you either should have buried that one or you should have led with it in the email. The fact that Paul has been here, fellas, you're better than that. Come on, guys. Come on. No, Paul's all right.
That's all right. Yeah. So, yeah, we actually had a interesting discussion with him. But yeah, we're going around to all the people that we can to ask them questions about politics and to give us their knowledge and wisdom, which Seth doesn't have the time for, apparently, and that I'm too nerded out for. So
that's good.
We're getting into it.
That's good. Aristotle said that virtue is found between two extremes, vice and deficiency. So you found it. One of you brings the nerdiness and the other one brings Riz, maybe. Maybe one's the Wizard of Oz.
Okay. Yeah, to defend myself a bit, I am a full-time student still. I'm finishing out my bachelor's, so I do have a little bit of a defense.
What are you majoring in?
Political science, actually.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. Well, I hope you have a robust trust fund or that you plan on, I don't know, maybe your feet look great and you're going to transition into OnlyFans. I don't know. I too was a political science graduate. I loved it. Yeah. And my plan was to then go to law school. And after practicing law for 5 to 10 years, then transition into politics formally, like as a candidate. And then law school at the time, I graduated college in 2013. And the market at the time was saturated with a bunch of unemployed law school graduates. So I wasn't going to sink the money into law school. So it kind of derailed all the rest. But the love of politics remains, man. But not the most lucrative career. But you know what? I'm sure you got a plan. I believe in you. Yeah. So maybe the O show. Maybe this.
Maybe it'll blow up.
Maybe.
Hell yeah.
Who knows? I mean, that's a good segue to, I'd love to hear more about your story into what you're doing now, Jessiah, to getting into the political influence. What interests you? Maybe what sparked that mission to become a political influencer? You're over 300,000 subscribers. You have videos that pop off from day-to-day politics, and you pump out a ton of content. It's like 3 videos a day or something like that.
6
Yeah.
On average. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, buddy. It's a lot. So yeah, I appreciate the channel's doing well. That may change after the election. I'm new. I mean, I'm a boomer. I really am. I'm 33, and that's boomer in internet years by any stretch. And until the pandemic, my life was pretty normy, and it still is for the most part. Like, I don't know, when we, right before we started, you were roasting Hassan. I don't know shit about Hassan. I could pick him out of a lineup. I bumped into him at the DNC. I know he's rich. I know he kind of says like really doofus shit, I don't know if we can curse here. I know he says some like really superficial things from time to time. I know he has beef with Destiny. I know he's wildly popular, but that's about it. So my story is I was born in northeastern Pennsylvania, which is very much like rural Kentucky. And then I grew up in rural Kentucky. So there was a lot of continuity there. Spent most of my life in really conservative places. Most of my family members and friends are conservative. Most of my teachers. I was just, I think, naturally predisposed to the more liberal side of things, thanks in large part to my paternal grandmother's influence. My father had a history of bipartisan voting, even though he wasn't particularly political. He voted for President Clinton twice. He would eventually go on to vote for, I think he voted for President Bush and then maybe Kerry. And I know he voted for Obama, President Obama, then voted for Governor Romney in 2012 because the Affordable Care Act, he said, made his insurance premium skyrocket. Then he voted for Trump in 2016, voted for Trump again in 2020. And then January 6th happened and he said, I'm done with Trump. We'll never vote for a Republican as long as Trump is the leader of the party. So
true centrist.
yeah, it was definitely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I love that.
Yeah, no, he definitely, I mean, it wasn't a particularly overtly political family, but to the extent that politics was discussed at all, my dad had no real like hard ideology. He was pretty flexible based on, I think, the vibe of the person who was the candidate, whether or not he thought that person would be preferable in terms of values. So I know compassion was a major factor. And again, really, when he started to vote Republican for those 3 elections in a row, it had to do with his pocketbook. So yeah, that was my history. I went to college, got a degree in political science, told you what I intended to do with it. That didn't work out. So I transitioned into sales. Then eventually became an account manager for a company in Kentucky, moved to a bigger city in Kentucky, Louisville, enjoyed city living instead of living in the sticks. Go ahead.
I'm there. I'm in Louisville right now, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so
okay.
funny.
You might not want to dox yourself, but because I was going to ask, like in terms of like what university you're going to, but Louisville's great, man. It's the only place I think, in my opinion, worth living in Kentucky. It's a really good city, and the whole slogan is "Keep Louisville Weird." It's got a lot of personality to it. Great bars on Bardstown Road and Baxter Avenue and stuff like that. So, have you been there long?
It's my 3rd year in college, so I've just been here for 3 years.
Gotcha. Yeah. Is it did you move there from a comparably sized city, or are you also from the sticks?
Josh, what would you say we're from?
We're from small town Midwest.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So Louisville is the biggest city you've ever lived in, right?
Yeah.
Have you found that it's a culture shock?
For me, not quite as much, because it's weird. The way I've always explained it is it's a very wide city, but it's not tall.
No.
There's not a whole lot of verticality to it at all. So it kind of just feels like you're in a big town, but it's just really, really big. But that's about it, which is nice.
Yeah, so, it's got it's downtown Louisville. I mean, it's fine. It's got a couple of modern high rises or whatnot, but yeah, it's not like you're looking at Chicago or anything like that. And then it's just kind of sprawling, Jeffersontown and J-Town and all the other like boroughs kind of surrounding it. And each of them have their own identity. J-Town's different from Germantown and stuff like that. So I would just caution you, be careful. It's very possible that you will fall in love with that city because it has a way about it of people who live in the sticks and grow up in small town USA and go to a city like that, which is bigger and it's got a zoo and an airport and you're like all the shit. You can go to concerts and be home in 10 minutes, but it's not so overwhelming that you feel like a total fish out of water. So you might find yourself permanently relocating there, man. So I'm just saying, be careful.
Possibly.
Yeah. So no, that's it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to share a little bit about our background so we can kind of, we're obviously, like we said, small town Wisconsin actually is the Midwest state. And our background is very conservative, very religious, evangelical Christian. So you'll see that from some of our content. And now we're positioned as never Trump conservatives. Very much in the David French line or lane is the path we're trying to follow, which is politically untenable in the
It's
current
cold and
Republican
lonely,
Party.
isn't it, fellas? It's cold and lonely.
Yep.
Cold and
Yeah.
lonely. Cold and lonely. So yeah, it's hard. We're fighting everybody. Pretty much is what it feels like. We make our parents mad. We make, I don't know, young liberals at college mad. Just really depends on the day.
Small
yeah,
high
that's
school
kind of our
friend.
lane. Yeah. So I'd love to ask you questions regarding like from your perspective, Jesiah.
Sure.
What do you think happened to the Republican Party today? Why does it feel like Seth and I, who in all intents and purposes are very personally conservative, why do we feel like we don't have a home in the Republican Party?
You don't. You don't. It's not a principled conservative opposition party. To the extent that the Republican Party ever had genuinely conservative principles, I think you can make the case that it did in one form or another until the Trump era. It abandoned all pretense under Donald Trump. So, no party is totally homogenous, including Republicans. I know we tend to get reductive, myself included, and say, Democrats are the big tent party, Republicans are not. And certainly I would argue the Democratic tent is much bigger than the Republican tent. But I think at the end of the day, there are certain aspects about the party collectively that lent itself well to a takeover by somebody like Donald Trump. So, not going to impute you all with this, but if you're conservative, more likely than not, you tend to value hierarchy and tradition and linear authority. The vulnerability there is if you're so captured by that, then if a demagogue manages to make his way up into the top of the food chain, then just by sheer reflex, decades of political tradition, perhaps cultural tradition as well, if it's also something that's just like a personal value, then it just lends itself well to, I don't particularly like this, but this person's the leader and he's the leader of the team, and the team is something that has a dynastic element to it. My father and his father before him and all these were right-wing conservatives and Republicans. I think all these things just kind of hit at once. And somebody like Donald Trump was just in a position, I don't think through any real genius. I just think he happened to be a really lucky idiot who, if he has one thing, it's just like an instinct, I think, for exploiting others. I don't think he's like some sort of grand supervillain strategist. I think he's just a guy who's grown up with privilege and wealth and the ability to recognize how to get things from others in a short-term way.
Yeah.
All these things kind of coalesce, and Trump took over the party, and there were opportunities along the way for principled conservatives to say, no, we're not going to go in this direction. The problem is that those principled conservatives
Bent the knee.
And even like people like Mitch McConnell is a good example. I don't like Mitch McConnell, but Mitch McConnell, I think, has a loyalty to something beyond himself. I don't think it's the country per se. I think at the end of the day, push comes to shove, he's shown he's loyal more to the Republican brand than the country. And I think he thought, as a lot of people did, that he could use Trump and then discard Trump when it was convenient. But what we're seeing now is a Frankenstein's monster situation where, Mitch McConnell says that he's not going to seek Senate leadership. He's going to serve out the remainder of his term. But after this election, he will no longer be the Republican leader. He's basically pulling a Nancy Pelosi. And Trump has outlasted him. It's a tragedy sort of thing where he helped create this monster, and this monster has supplanted him. So I think that's why you find yourselves in this situation, because people who were leaders and say that they were principled conservatives, at the end of the day, they put political expediency above all else. And it's killed your party. And potentially it's going to damage even more the country itself. I mean, I'll just say, throw it back to you.
Yeah.
As somebody who's not a Republican, I would probably enjoy it a bit more. And I would say with good reason, because the party brought it on itself. But it's hard for me to really delight in what's happening to the GOP, because what happens to the GOP has broader implications for the country as a whole.
Yeah. And then on the I guess the inverse of my question is, what do you think makes Democrats maybe not as susceptible to that same on the other end of it? Like, I look at a Bernie Sanders, kind of hits at the same heartstrings that a Trump figure would, and the Democrats seem to reject him in that way and then go for a Biden, or even in a unthinkable sense, they went for Hillary Clinton, who I think is the only candidate that could have lost to Trump. Why do you think that Democrats are? Is it just that their establishment is far more in alignment? Is it that their base are just smarter than Republicans right now? Why do you think maybe they're able to protect themselves from the same susceptibility? Because Trump was a Democrat for his like whole life, and then shifted to go to Republican. So obviously he saw the vulnerability there.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Liz Cheney, who's of course a lifelong conservative Republican who supported Trump 93% of the time, according to aggregate analyses of legislation. So she was a diehard Republican, a team player, and someone who backed Trump when he was president. Not only has she turned against him, she has now officially endorsed the vice president. I think that, I don't know if it's the Democrats are smarter, although I don't want to talk out of my ass. I know I have seen. There are some studies out there, but I've also seen studies to the contrary, which indicate that political liberalism is correlated with higher IQ, whatever measure you put it or stock you put into that. I think first and foremost, I'm not going to sit here and say that there's no permutation of the multiverse. There's no timeline out there where the situation is not flipped. It's possible. I would say, though, if you're just asking me kind of instinctively, again, I think the values and the traditions which undergird the conservative movement just better lend themselves well to falling in line behind a demagogue, whereas the left is prone, generally speaking. Now, it's been flipped actually in the age of Trump until the past 6 months or so, I would say. We've seen a reversal of this, but generally speaking, the adage is liberals fall in love, conservatives fall in line. And I think that that's really the difference, because even like, I don't really buy into the establishment versus anti-establishment, line either, because like right now, Bernie Sanders is getting shit left, right, and center from people who probably would have taken a bullet for him 4 to 6 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You don't really see that with Trump. Like even the Bernie bros, their loyalty is much more conditional and limited than MAGA. President Obama was, love him or hate him, he's still very popular within the Democratic Party and far more popular overall. And I know if MAGA or centrists are watching, I love to point this out. Barack Obama was, is, and shall forever be more popular than Donald Trump was, is, and shall ever be. Donald Trump has never been a popular political figure. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either an idiot, a Trump cultist, or a liar. Barack Obama was an objectively popular figure, but even President Obama is somebody who is widely criticized within the Democratic Party and didn't have like the cult of personality. He's probably the closest we've had in terms of like a leading figure. But there's nothing comparable to what we see with Trump. So I think that it's just the Democratic Party's propensity towards infighting and complaining and never settling and constantly pushing the envelope, which, by the way, some people celebrate. But I will tell you, as a Democrat, it's often quite annoying. Not that I want them to settle per se, but there are times where you got to shut up and let's unite in the face of a common adversary. And typically speaking, Democrats really struggle with this. So I think it's just a combination of factors. And I think if at the end of the day, you held a gun to my head and say, what is it really at the nuts and bolts of it? I just think that conservative values better lend themselves. Well, I mean, it's also not to attack religion, but also a reason why we see greater degrees of religiosity among conservatives too. To get really reductive, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, conservatives are generally more comfortable just being told what to do by a religious or political authority figure than liberals, in my estimation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Seth, do you have any questions on that to bounce off that? I've got a couple, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just going to ask a little bit, like, but he kind of hit on this of the infighting, because it does seem to me like had Nikki Haley stayed in, I probably would have voted her to try to beat out Trump, but then she dropped, which is super frustrating.
and
But
then endorsed
anytime-
him.
Yeah, right. Anytime somebody fights against Trump even a little bit, it seems like everybody in the party, not just Trump and his followers, but also the other candidates and the other lawmakers, just jump on them as well. Where it's like, where do you go from there to bring back that good infighting, I guess?
Well, I think some of it's also fear of consequences, right? So President Biden is still the president of the United States. He is the most powerful man on earth, far more powerful than Donald Trump, because he has the nuclear codes and Trump doesn't.
Right.
And yet there's no fear in the Democratic Party to publicly criticize the president. There is a fear of consequences that Donald Trump has instilled, and perhaps more accurately, Trump's base, not even necessarily other politicians. I mean, I'm sure that the barks of Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz, I'm sure that plays a role, but it's also the nameless MAGA voters who will call federal judges and threaten to kill them because Donald Trump has been indicted. That doesn't happen in the Democratic Party because there's just not that level of loyalty there. Certainly not on that frequency, I should say. So you would need politicians who would be prepared not only to lose elections, but to be prepared to put themselves and their loved ones in physical jeopardy. Mitt Romney is a great example of this. Mitt Romney, a conservative Republican who used to lead the party, not just any, this is the other thing. It's so funny how MAGA Republicans
Not that long ago.
Not that long ago, Mitt Romney was the leader of the Republican Party. And he said that multiple Republican senators confided in him and congressmen that they wanted to vote to impeach Trump, but didn't, or to convict Trump of the impeachment, but didn't because they were afraid for their lives. That takes, I think, a special type of person to be willing to put their physical health and their lives and the lives of their loved ones at risk. And then, of course, there's a more cynical version, which is they don't want to lose re-election. And Trump cultists struggle in general elections because, again, Trump is not popular. And consequently, diehard Trump supporters are not popular on a national level. But the primary system incentivizes you to run as close to Trump as possible. So it's like a catch-22. They can't, Mitt Romney is probably more likely to win a general election against a Democrat in Utah than a Trump support, like a diehard Trump cultist. But Romney would lose to the cultist in the primary, right? So it's created this like mutually exclusive set of incentives. And so you would need people at the right time and the right moment to be willing to risk their lives, the lives of their loved ones in re-election, to say, for example, convict the guy when he's impeached. And instead they didn't. And so I think, quite frankly, but I'm a cynic, I think when I say you all, I mean Republicans, I think you're all stuck with Trump until he dies.
So you think, okay, yeah, that's a good, interesting way to go. So you think if Trump loses this last election, they're going to go ahead and nominate him again, even if Kamala Harris wins pretty handedly, which it's looking like it's going to be really close. Yeah, but even if Kamala Harris wins handedly, you think they're just going to nominate him again in 28?
If he wants to run, I think one of two things will happen. He'll run, or he will coronate Don Jr., or somebody like that. He will play kingmaker. But I believe, and I could be wrong, right? And I'm not a prophet because I didn't expect Donald Trump to win the 2016 election. I remember very vividly being at Brick House on Hurstbourne Avenue in Louisville, Kentucky, November 5th, 2016, at a bar with a bunch of friends. and watching the votes come in, and Secretary Clinton was down, but I'm like, that's fine. I'm going to go to bed. I'll wake up and she'll be the 45th president of the United States, because there's no fucking way that we're going to elect Donald Trump. And then we did. After that, I got out of the prophecy business. So, but if you asked me genuinely, if you forced me to bet money, I would just assume that they're not going to let Trump go, because why would they? Here's the other thing to remember, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, and this is something that you all more than anybody have to convince your peers. Trump is a loser. Like I need people to get, like, objectively. I know I'm not talking about in terms of character. He's that too. I mean, in terms of
politically, he's a loser.
Yeah. The Trump alphabet is 1 W and 25 L's, right? It's that's what it is. He lost the 2018 midterms. He lost the 2020 presidential election. He lost the 2021 Senate runoffs. They lost the 2022 midterms. They lost the 2023 off-year elections. And at the moment, he's losing the 2024 election. He was impeached twice. He was acquitted twice. They had every opportunity to move on,
to get away.
So why would we assume that 2024 would be any different? Especially, as you say, Josh, the indicators show it's going to be a close election no matter what. I think he's there till he dies, or if he has some sort of grand epiphany where he basically pulls a George Bush and says, I'm done with politics. I'm out. I'm fucking off to a ranch in Texas to finger paint, or whatever it is that President Bush does these days. Unless Trump does that, he's the leader of the Republican Party till he dies. And he may not necessarily be the candidate, but he will be kingmaker. He will be the power. You guys Game of Thrones fans?
A little bit. Yeah, I've read the book. Well, the first one. I read through the series. Yeah.
He's Tywin Lannister. He's the power behind the throne. Like, the other guy's king, but we all know who really, like, that'll be Trump. Why would it be anything else?
An interesting thing that maybe will change, and what is so frustrating about all these indictments, Jessiah, is that they keep getting pushed back after the election. So I guess the scenario we don't know is if he loses and then he gets convicted of all of these indictments, and he's in prison, then that might be the Republicans' only saving grace to get away from him running himself. But again, the fear is that he then runs a Donald Trump Jr.
Right.
So yeah,
even with that though, he's still talking about the election being fraudulent. Just recently on Lex Fridman, he brought it back up again. So I'm not very convinced. Even if he does go to jail, I don't know if any of his followers are going to stop.
No. And again, why? I mean, number one, major oversight of the Constitution, but you can run for and be president of the United States from prison. Number one. Number two, and this goes to my broader frustration. This is why, as a general principle, I think that the GOP just needs a political timeout. That's why I think that, if I could snap my fingers, there would be not one elected Republican in this country, collectively, even the good ones, because I turn to the good ones and say, you all should have done better like even Liz Cheney. And I got to say this for the record, like, I think it's great that what Liz Cheney and Mike Pence and Adam Kinzinger have done, and Kinzinger most especially, because Kinzinger has the humility to say,
I was wrong.
Not only was he wrong, but he was actually wrong in the worst way, because he'll tell you Trump didn't deceive him. Donald Trump is fundamentally the same Donald Trump he was in 2016. Yes, he's slower. Yes, he's less coherent. But again, I'm trying to think, maybe not Game of Thrones. Do you guys watch Star Wars? Are you Star Wars fans?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Donald Trump is not Emperor Palpatine in the prequels, pretending to be something he's not. This, charismatic, affable, I love democracy, and then revealing himself at the right moment to be a cackling lunatic. He was always the cackling lunatic in public. Right. And so for you to be a principled conservative and to be behind that, it says a couple of things. You're either, again, really, really, really stupid, in which case you shouldn't be trusted with car keys, let alone the levers of power, or you were just a little bit corrupted and going, yeah, I know he is morally inferior to Hillary Clinton, but you know what? I can make it work. I can change him. And so Adam Kinzinger's upfront about that. He made compromises. He wasn't tricked. He made moral compromises. His moral failure, and it's all his fault. That's what I love about it. He takes responsibility. He wasn't tricked. He wasn't pressured. He fucked up, and he owns it, and he does the mea culpa. And so that's why, with the exception of Kinzinger, I think even Liz Cheney struggles with this. The whole party needs a timeout, because you either aided and abetted Trump, or you stepped aside and let him walk through. And again, it just says something either about your character or your judgment. But unfortunately, I can't snap my fingers and make that happen. So at the end of the day, I think that with Trump, what you see is what you get. It's not going to change. And I don't see his base leaving him till he dies.
Which, as a Democrat, what I keep telling people in my circle as well, because you said Trump's a loser politically, Democrats got to have, there's this fear that he could win, right? Because 2016 is like the biggest, I don't know, that's like a nightmare for Democrat scenario. But there's also this thought that Democrats could sweep with Kamala Harris stepping in 8 years, and then you nominate someone after him if it's a Don Jr. I really just think Trumpism is generally unelectable unless the Democrats are running a Hillary Clinton.
No, I don't know, because here's the thing. Trump beat Hillary. The 2020 election was pretty clear. Here's the thing. Trump is a loser, but he has the potential not to be. That's the thing. It's like he's a loser in terms of his record because of his own shortcomings, but he's not a loser in that it's impossible for him to win. The American system advantages the Republican Party in so many ways, from the Electoral College to gerrymandering to the composition of the Senate. You have a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. 30 state legislatures, 30, belong to the Republican Party. The media, the single biggest element of people talk about mainstream media. Fox News is mainstream media. It's the single biggest chunk of mainstream. Their viewer ratings dwarf CNN and MSNBC combined. They are mainstream media, and they're ideologically predisposed towards Republicans. You also have Newsmax and OAN. CNN, I argue vociferously that CNN grades Trump on a curve, and I can defend that proposition. MSNBC is the closest thing to like a defiant, inverse of Fox, but they have a fraction of the viewership. Getting to alternate media, my channel's doing well, but I am a drop in a bucket compared to like Tim Pool or to Ben Shapiro or whatever. Destiny Pacman, Brian Tyler Cohen, you add all of us up there, Luke Beasley, and we're like half, a third, a quarter, right? So
the Daily Wire is huge. It's
massive.
So huge.
It's massive. And now we find out they have Russia money, or that the right wing has Russia money behind them too. So I mean, we have a hostile foreign power to compete with too. But my point is that Trump on his own could never win because he's just too stupid. But simply as the leader, as the guy who gets to inherit this movement with all those advantages, yes, in 2020 and in 2024, he could win. I mean, he could have won in 2020. I mean, my God, you think about all the headwinds that had to be against Trump. He was the incumbent president. We were dealing with a once-in-a-century pandemic. Mail-in voting and avenues to vote were maximized. The economy was in the shitter. And yes, he lost by 7 million votes. That's true. But we don't elect for whatever reason, we've decided that we're going to elect our president with political affirmative action, which is what the Electoral College is for the Republicans. You don't elect your governor of Wisconsin or the governor of Kentucky via Electoral College. Right. We just decide, like, hey, maybe the guy who's more popular should win. I don't know. But Donald Trump could win. It was 40,000 votes in a handful of swing states that cost him the 2020 election, despite every advantage that the Democrats had. It was that close. And so you do have to take it seriously. I wouldn't say that Trumpism is unelectable. I think Trumpism, all else being equal, is unelectable, because then it just comes down to popularity and record, and Trumpism will lose every time. But he's got a lot of institutional advantages in his back pocket. He could absolutely win this thing.
Seth, you got anything bouncing off of that?
Bouncing off of that,
Or whatever. You could take it anywhere, Seth. I don't.
Yeah, man, take it anywhere.
Well, I'm curious because, like, I think Josh and I agree with you that, like, we feel like the Republican Party is just, like, doomed for the next at least
We're screwed.
12 years, at least, I want to say. And that's being, like, generous. Of like, that's like a quick turnaround.
The only thinking is my hypothesis, and I guess my fool's hope, is that, you know, like you said, Jessiah, I never could have guessed that Hillary Clinton would lose to Trump. But even before that, I wouldn't have guessed that the Republican Party would go from a Mitt Romney to Donald Trump in one election cycle.
Yeah.
And so could these people be so drawn to power that if Trump loses handedly to Kamala Harris, would they be looking for a DeSantis, who is still a little bit too populist for my liking, but is not a Donald Trump when it comes to his morals? Could they get to a Nikki Haley eventually? You know, like, does power and politics play a role here?
Oh, I think they could, but again, I just don't think so as long as Trump is alive. You got to remember that Trump commands a loyalty from the Republican base that we've just not seen. I mean, here's the dangerous thing. Remember why I said the old expression is Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. With Trump, they fell in love and in line, and that is hard to top. So here's the big one, and this is where, again, you know, and I'll just say, if at any point you disagree, I will encourage you to speak up, because I don't expect you to. It'd be great if you did, and if you believed it, but I don't expect you all to just bash the GOP along with me. But full disclosure, again, part of my contempt for the party as an institution, again, not every individual Republican. I've got 4 sisters, and at least 3 of them are Republicans. I don't have contempt. I love them. I take a bullet for them. But the party, the thought leaders, the political leaders, I have such contempt for it, because we see the falling in love and falling in line helix with the Trump immunity thing. Great example.
Mm-hmm.
If you told me 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, let's take it back to 11, because I think 10 years ago, Trump was becoming a more assertive presence in Republican politics. But 10 or 11 years ago, if you told me, hey, listen, there will come a day where the Republican Party will cheer a president demanding absolute total immunity, and not only will the Supreme Court comply, Republicans will cheer. If you told me that 10 years ago, I'd think you're out of your mind, because if there's anything that, yes, Republicans like their tradition and their hierarchies or whatever, but they don't like total authority. They like to submit to leaders, but not be forced to submit. If you follow your preacher, it's because you choose to. May I'll do whatever my preacher says, but it's not because your preacher is making you. You're not making your preacher the Pope. So if somebody told me that, I would have been like, that's impossible. It's insane. It's counterintuitive to what Republicans profess to value, which is the decentralization of power. Why on earth would they centralize so much power and impunity in one person? Not even the federal government, one actor in the federal government. But here we are. You look at the polls, a majority of Americans say they don't support presidential immunity. But if you change the polling question from should presidents get absolute immunity to Trump, then it skyrockets among Republicans. That is, and this is where I wouldn't have expressed it the way he expressed some of his beliefs, but in terms of the contempt that Destiny has for that there, I share it. It is un-American. It is counterintuitive. It's dangerous. It deserves nothing but contempt and derision, and should be bullied relentlessly into obsolescence. If you are a person who believes that Donald Trump, or quite frankly any president, including a Democrat, should be given absolute immunity, you should have a panic attack at the thought of expressing your opinion publicly, because you will be mocked and belittled so much. Not be in any physical danger, but because you'll be treated like that loser kid at the lunch table sitting by themselves. That's how you should feel. And I would feel that way about any Democrat says, Joe Biden should get absolute immunity. Are you out of your effing mind? No, nobody should be trusted with that level of power. Nobody.
Right.
Imagine if tan suit wearing Dijon mustard eating Barack Obama in 2013 said, well, let me be clear. I need absolute immunity. What would Fox and the Republicans have done? They'd be pulling out their pitchforks, probably their white sheets, and they would be trying to secede from the union. But because it's Trump, it's changed. No, you can't reason with that. That deserves nothing but contempt. Yeah. But here we are.
I'll play a little bit of defense to Republicans, not now, but Republicans in 2016. I think that what was brain breaking was they were told Mitt Romney was going to win in 2012. Polling numbers was indicating that. Mitt Romney was this goody two shoes Mormon boy. And then Mitt Romney lost to Obama, who, again, like you were saying, Obama's approval rating wasn't really as reflective of how popular he actually was in a general election. But Mitt Romney lost, and Republicans were so bitter. Yeah. And they felt belittled. They felt like Hollywood was belittling them. They felt like Democrat establishment was making fun of them. They felt like Obama didn't represent them for 8 years. And then they turned to somebody they thought was a winner who was making fun of the other goody two-shoes who they considered a loser, like the Marco Rubios and the Ted Cruzes. And then a big argument that we heard from our parents was well, we don't know what Trump's going to do. He says some stuff we don't like about. We don't know who he's going to be, what he's going to be. And then he won, which was the worst case scenario because we're talking about, they fell in line because he won and they were sipping the Kool-Aid of Trump because they got a taste of political power. And it's sad because now we know what Trump is, we know what he advocates for, we know what he does. January 6th is one of the most outlandish political events I have ever witnessed in my life. Seth and I are a little bit spared, Josiah, because of our age, because we didn't grow up in a GOP that was anything but Trump. Really, when we come to voting age, it's only been Trump. And so we feel like we've never really closely aligned with that. We've aligned with maybe some type of conservatism. I grew up in the facts don't care about your feelings, Ben Shapiro, debating college kids. And that was my media diet. And then growing up, it's they're going to this Trump guy now. And so, I can't explain it, especially from what we've seen from Trump, other than they have to do this game, which they're doing now, which is Kamala Harris has to be a communist, has to be faking, her race, has to be literally the worst person ever in order to justify voting for Donald Trump. And I just think it's insane. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, listen, again, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're, especially for Republican voters, again, I don't hold them more. I think that leaders of a movement are more morally culpable for what that movement's excesses than just the rank and file members or those who are kind of swept up in it. Most people don't pay close attention to politics. And again, that's why the parties are a good heuristic, or I shouldn't say good, they are just the heuristic that we use, right? So if generally speaking, you're Republican, then it really doesn't freaking matter what name is next to that R. You just look for the R, and vice versa for Democrats. It's not just exclusive to Republicans. I mean, my God, I consider myself pretty well versed in politics, but I'd be lying to you if every time I went to the ballot box, or any time I went to the ballot box, that I knew intimately the policy preferences and history of the dozens of people that you could be voting for on any given ballot. After the first 3 or 4, you're like, D, school board, D, right. Yeah. Check all. So no, I take your point. And that's why, again, I don't have really any contempt for the average Republican voter. For me, my ire is reserved for MAGA thought leaders and Republican leaders who, again, had opportunities, the second impeachment, first impeachment, really, second impeachment in particular. And then yeah, just Kevin McCarthy. Not only did they vote to convict, they could have just left him exiled in Mar-a-Lago. I don't think that would have been sufficient, but they had that option, and Kevin McCarthy just took shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and so he just like screw it, I'll go bend the knee to shore up my own support, and they resuscitate him. They
that didn't work
life.
out for that didn't work out for McCarthy.
No, it didn't. Right, and that's the other thing too. I mean, my God, that sort of thing is funny. It is funny. And again, would just love the opportunity. The goal should be to make these people cry in public, where it's like, what were you thinking, you loser? I mean, have you learned nothing? The tiger eating, the tiger eating face party memes and all this shit. Like, what have you learned? Loyalty goes in one direction with Donald Trump, and it's from you to him. It's never reciprocated. Never. My God, he had the power with a stroke of the pen to pardon one, some, or all of the insurrectionists who marched on the Capitol because he told them the election was stolen. And people who have pled out and pled guilty, almost always they say, I did it for Trump. Trump told me they are also, I mean, they have agency and they deserve what they got in terms of the consequences, but they were also victims too. And he could have snapped his fingers, and I don't think it was because he was afraid to pardon them. I just don't think he thinks like that. It's like, that's where he is like a sociopathic movie villain where, they lay down their lives for the mooks do for the big bad villain. And he just steps over the corpses and keeps walking without a second. That's how his brain works. And so when Kevin McCarthy at the end of the day loses the speakership, and Trump's patronage amounted to nothing, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's so damn funny. But yeah.
I'll ask you an honest question.
Sure.
I want you to be honest with us. Do the Democrats, do you even want an Adam Kinzinger? Do you want someone like the Obros to join this coalition? Or are we actually harming Democrat policy and wishes?
I don't think you're harming
an election.
No, I don't think you're harming it at all. I think it's great. Here's my thing. And I said this actually when I did a video earlier today about Tim Miller, NeverTrumper, who runs the Bulwark. He was on Piers Morgan earlier today, and I think what they're doing is, because here's the thing. Here's my cringe shit lib take. I love The West Wing. It's one of my favorite shows. The first 4 seasons of The West Wing, really good stuff. Now, of course, I recognize it's a work of fiction, particularly in 2024. It has no resemblance to real life. But of course, I don't mind, because then there can be what I call good faith politicking, right? I would love if politics was just me versus the O Bros or the O Show Bros, because because then it's like, okay, it's like sports in the sense, like, you're invested in it, you fight like hell, not in the Trump insurrectionist way, but in the giving it your all way. And then at the end of the day, even in the bitter defeat, you can shake hands, because not that losing to O Bro Show Republicans wouldn't have consequences. I do think that conservative policies, I think that overall they're suboptimal for the country. I think there would be real consequences for people if principled conservatives were able to enact policy. But I wouldn't fear about, I don't think that there would be existential dread. I would think, okay, now that means we're going to have to struggle a bit for the next 4 years, and then we'll have another shot at the title. I would much rather deal with that. And even the again, very real implications of principled conservative Republican policies being enacted. I don't want to downplay that, but I would much rather deal with that and say, if I lose, fewer people will get health care. Yes, that will have a downstream effect. I do think there will be people who die as a consequence of this. I really don't want to downplay it, but I wouldn't fear that we'll lose our democracy, or that we'll lose the framework which permits good faith politicking. So yes, of course, I think there's room in the Democratic Party. I would never make Adam Kinzinger the leader of the Democratic Party. I could, the vice president was asked during her CNN interview, would she
add someone to her cabinet?
Yeah, would she have someone on her cabinet? Now, I want to be clear. I'm not that much of a West Wing fan in the sense I'm not going to make President Jessiah will not have a 50% Republican cabinet, but I could see making Adam Kinzinger Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. He's a veteran. He's a combat veteran. He was a fighter pilot. He's principled. And I would also trust that if I give him an order as president to subordinate, he would follow through on it. But yeah, so no, I wouldn't I wouldn't forfeit the Democratic Party to conservatives. I would say, hey, you're still going to be playing second fiddle in terms of shaping the party's leadership. But no, of
You're
course,
saying we can get in the back of the bus? Just
I think. Listen, so one of you. No, wait a minute. Whoa. The back of the bus is where the cool people are, right? I don't know how they did in school when you all. I mean, I know you all are younger, but when I was in school, the cool kids sat in the back of the bus. You all would sit up near the bus driver, right?
Okay, yeah.
And one of you would probably have to run behind. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, I think it's. I think it was good that he spoke at the DNC, for example. A lot of people didn't like that. A lot of people like, why would you give this person?
I wanted more.
Right. Okay. All right. Calm down, man. See what I'm saying? Yeah.
Just wait. Just think about Josiah. We didn't have any of people from Trump's cabinet who are outwardly anti-Trump now.
Yeah.
Speaking against Trump. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I just felt we didn't even get a Liz Cheney up there. Like,
there are at least
there was
dozen.
there.
Yeah, there are at least 2 dozen who wouldn't. And there again, quite frankly, that's a great observation, which also goes to show the problems that still linger even in the never Trump or recovering Trump contingent of the GOP. Because General John Kelly, Donald Trump's former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, his first Secretary of State, whose name I'm blanking on. What's this guy's name? I want to call them an F. Rex Tillerson. All these people, they should be coming out. I mean, they're not in professional politics anymore. They should all be coming out, like Mark Esper and others, saying, "Hell yeah, he's a threat to democracy," and "Hell yeah,
they got books to sell."
Yeah,
right. I mean, we saw H.R. McMaster, one of, if not his very first national security advisor, did that too. He just dropped a book and came out and spilled some dirty secrets about Donald Trump. Yeah, there's a cynicism there. But no, the last thing I'll just say is, yes, of course, I think that there's room for, my God, Joe Manchin's part of this party. And I'd rather have Joe Manchin in West Virginia than Jim Justice, right? I mean, it's a big tent party, and I'm fine with us fighting with each other, in good faith. But yeah, at the end of the day, though, it should be a temporary thing. What you all should be doing, and people like you, should be joining the Democratic Party in fighting like hell to make the Democratic Party defeat Trump. Basically, when it comes to, if Trumpism is the alternative, you should be 110% for Kamala Harris, because there's not a single policy that she has proposed or even flirted with that should offend you as much as Trumpism. Then when you know that Trumpism is defeated, when the monster is obliterated, when the specter is destroyed, then once you're certain, okay, this isn't going to come back in a sequel, then you split off again. And then we could go back to the way God intended it, which is for us to just yell at each other in perpetuity, but not have to fear about the country collapsing in 2 years.
Yeah. On that, would you much rather see us go back to just fighting about like actual policies and economics versus all the social politics stuff?
DEI.
Because to me, like all this, to me, even though I'm so young, I feel weird because whenever I talk to my peers who are also studying politics, even they only care about the social politics now. And I feel like I'm lost in the past almost, because I care way more about economics and actual politics.
Balancing the budgets.
Yeah. I care about actual stuff that would help people, I feel like, but I'm like screaming into the void.
Well, policy has both a fiscal and a social component. I don't want you to walk away thinking that, trans issues and LGBTQ issues and stuff like that, there are policies that gay marriage is a policy, and I would argue that you should enthusiastically support it. I think that whatever your thoughts may be, for example, on trans people, I think at the bare minimum, a level of compassion. I mean, it's the most ostracized and bullied community with a high rate of suicidality and things like that. And I don't traffic in culture war issues by any stretch. So this is kind of outside my wheelhouse. I tend to stick more to electoral politics and policy as well. But you should absolutely be aware that, of course, policy has a social component. But yeah, I think that, I mean, what's the popular refrain? I'm socially liberal, fiscally conservative, because I think most people recognize, even if they don't necessarily outwardly agree to it, generally speaking, maybe not progressive, but on liberal versus conservative, conservatives lost the social war, right? Gay marriage, like gay, for example, approval for gay marriage has actually dipped a little bit, particularly among Republicans over the past few years. But gay marriage is going nowhere, due in no small part to President Biden passing a law, the Freedom of Marriage Act, or not Defense of Marriage Act, I think it's the Respect for Marriage Act, effectively enshrining the Obergefell decision, which guaranteed gay marriage protections from the Supreme Court. So you probably just want to let that one go. There's no, I mean, that is, if there is any degree of homophobia in your heart, and I'm not asking if there is, don't care to know, that's probably one you should probably just sit on until you die, because it's not going anywhere, right? So yes, I think it would be, if I'm a conservative, I would imagine it would be a more legitimate and more legitimizing posture to focus on fiscal policy. Then, of course, you have to be very honest and say, Republicans are not particularly fiscally responsible either. So you have a lot of work to do. If it's me, if I were in your positions, I'd be like, you know what? Gonna let the social shit go. Take the L on that one. Focus instead on balancing budgets and addressing deficits. But of course, my party's got a lot of redemption to do on that front, given that the current leader of the Republican Party added $8 trillion to the national debt, promising that not only would he not add a nickel to the debt, he would actually wipe out all the debt he inherited from his predecessors. So yeah, that would actually be great, because not only would that be fiscally responsible, you'd have a lot of work to do. It would keep you very busy for a few decades, redeeming the GOP on that score.
Yeah, I guess the social stuff really depends on the issue, Seth, because I think a big one in social conservatism's defense would be abortion. I think we've seen social conservatism, even among liberals, abortion just are going down nationwide, and they have been since the 80s. And that's for Democrats increasing, social policy, that contraception, sexual education, whatever it is from a liberal end, and then Republicans are more pro-life. And so abortions from a social conservatism, if the goal is reducing abortions, which as pro-lifers, that's the hope. We've seen that our country is tending to get away from abortion being a means of birth control. We're not there yet, but it seems like they are going to different alternatives.
Sure. And here's what I'll say. Listen, I think that abortion is the one social issue, even though ironically it's electorally the right's kryptonite, I think in large part because they just overreach and have overreached for so long that nobody takes them. Like when Donald Trump says, I wouldn't sign a national abortion ban, I want to be clear. I don't think Trump personally, like if he had his preference, I mean, there's no fucking way that guy is not paid for abortions. He probably like his car insurance payment. He's probably got a subscription to some sort of like abortion clinic somewhere. So I believe him on that, but I also believe that he's so cynical and dishonest that if it was politically in his best interest to sign an abortion ban to please the evangelical base or whatever, like if his electoral fortunes count on, hell yeah, he would sign it in a heartbeat. What I would say is this, because I think it would just be better for everybody this way, including not just you all, but also your opponents, myself included, is if you want to stake out a position on abortion, I could see, especially if you're a religious conservative, that is one principally and politically, there might be something to stake out on. But what I'll tell you is cheat code is, where again, if you wanted to take this project up, if the Osho bros were in, if there were thousands of you, this would be a really good initiative to redeem your party's reputation as being actually pro-life instead of pro-forced birth. Because I would argue the GOP has earned its reputation as really being pro-forced birth. They're really, I'm not saying you two, I'm using the royal you. Yeah. Really what you care about is forcing women to carry a fetus to term against her will. Like, that's what really gets you hard. Like, yeah, making this woman do something she really doesn't want to. And then as soon as the baby leaves the birth canal, you're like, peace, don't care. Your party has, or your former party has earned that reputation with its callousness. They were the ones who opposed robust sex education, contraception, all the things which would help reduce abortions.
Can I push back real quick, Jessiah, on this?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah. Do
you think that I have seen a huge gap in appealing to pro-lifers? I don't know if you've seen this, Jessiah, but abortions go significantly more down under Democrat presidencies than Republicans. And it's something that Democrats can't run on, because I think Democrats are in this position where they need to run on abortion so much so that it's almost like we're treating it like it's a form of birth control, when really, even from, in my perspective as a pro-choice position, this isn't something that we should advocate as the first quick and easy option. This is like the last option, and then the pro-choice position is we want to still have that choice. But it seems like you're in, like, the Democrats are also going too far on the left. We're saying, like, we need to make this as accessible, easy, taxpayer-funded abortion. We're going to have a DNC Planned Parenthood truck outside of our convention. So it's like these two sides are like,
but see, that's the thing. Like, even that right there, Planned Parenthood, like, a fraction of their services are abortion services. It's not like the Planned Parenthood DNC truck was just, hey, put your feet in the stirrups and I've got some forceps and let's go to town on your 8-month-old fetus. I mean, listen, I take your point that Democrats are absolutely hitting that insta-win abortion button, right? Because we know it's a winner for us electorally. I would also argue that under the current circumstances, not like even if you look at it from just purely cynical politics, these are what circumstances have driven us to, where we really have to emphasize the fact that abortion is such a personal issue for people, and that if you held a gun to their head, I mean, Roe v. Wade is the standard that people wanted, right? Elective abortions in the first trimester, open to restrictions in the second trimester, and then the state could really crack down on third trimester abortions, such that only if the mother's life was jeopardized could you get access to it. That was the Roe standard. It gave the state that right. People don't want, I mean, Jon Stewart, or it was Pete Buttigieg who said it best, third trimester abortions are so rare because who the fuck would want to put them, like the caricature is on the right that evil women are out there going through all the back pain and midnight urination and everything. Just we want to wait. We want to crank. We want to wait as long as possible and then go through an incredibly emotionally and physically taxing procedure just because it excites us to see a dead fetus. I mean, it's just not the case. I take your point that, again, that Democrats use it for electoral reasons. But what I'm saying is, and I wasn't pointing the finger, what I'm saying is it would be better for everyone, your political party, my political party, because the consequences if we lose wouldn't be so severe, and then just women in general, if, again, the Republicans, like, hey, listen, for decades, we were pro-forced birth. That was wrong. We have purged that sentiment from our party. We want to make abortions obsolete. So, yeah, sex education, kids are going to get it. We're going to cram sex education down public schools' throats. You're not going to go into your sophomore year of high school. I went to high school in rural Kentucky. I can say this from personal experience. Don't know how education was in Wisconsin for you all being considerably younger. But our sex education, they skipped certain parts. So we knew what happened when a sperm fertilized an egg, but how it got there, they skipped that part of the DVD, right? They didn't tell you that it's possible to become pregnant through pre-ejaculate and stuff like that. Like, you just didn't, it was abstinence only. That's insane. if you genuinely want to reduce abortions, the next time someone's like, hey, maybe we should teach abstinence only in school, you punch them right in the mouth. You're like, no, that doesn't work. So I think it would be a really good project for genuinely principled conservatives to say, you know what, this is an electoral loser for us. It's also one we care a lot about because we do think abortion is murder. And so knowing that we have and will always lose electorally on this, what is a better way to accomplish this goal? Robust sex education, robust social safety nets for families and individuals, as cheap or free as possible. And if that means taking Elon Musk from $250 billion down to 248, you do it anyway, either free or dirt cheap pre and neonatal care, et cetera, and so forth. You drown people in other easy, effortless options. You squash that voice in you that says, no, people should work for their pre and neonatal care. No, it's you pick one. Do you want to prevent abortions or do you want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps? Electorally, you're not getting both. You make it free, cheap, easy, effortless, and you will see the number of abortions, which are already dropping, drop further still, and it would probably no longer be electoral kryptonite for you.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Shifting gears real quick, because I know Jessiah, you've got a football party to go to.
Yeah, when I'm
the
like,
DOJ,
oh, yay, they threw the ball past the line and
the ball
he
through
did
the
that.
uprights for a
Yeah.
home run.
They kicked that sports ball. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The DOJ released that indictment on Russian interference in our election through the likes of, allegedly, I gotta say that as no one, don't get me FBI, allegedly Tim Pool and Dave Rubin. I wanted to ask, because I mean, obviously I know your opinion on the likes of Tim Pool and Dave Rubin, probably similar to ours. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think this is going to...
Love them. No, I'm just kidding. They're comrades. They're fellow commie comrades like myself.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
I wanted to ask you what you thought. What do you think this is going to do to like the alternative independent media space? Because you yourself are a rising figure in that. And I'm wondering, like, you know, this makes me question a lot about alternative media spaces, because it's not just, you know, Russia's willing to throw a lot of dollars. They talked about Iran throwing dollars, and then not even foreign agents, but let's say if corporations are throwing dollars at like a Hassan or a whatever, what's the defense of independent media? Why should I listen to anybody on YouTube or trust when it seems like these amount of dollars people are willing to do this?
The real question is if you're paid off. That's what we want to know.
Guys, you're cutting out.
Oh no, he's frozen, Seth. I think, I don't know. I was going to make a joke.
RNC
got him.
Moscow's calling. I got to call you back. No, Caracas, it's Venezuela. No, no, not paid off. As a matter of fact, the group, I worked with Progressive Victory, which is a political progressive PAC that I kind of got introduced through Destiny, because I went canvassing with DGG and Destiny's community back in it was the midterm, so it was 2022. And I guess, like, I don't know like the entire history, but I know like a lot of what would be Progressive Victory, like there was an incestuous relationship there, that they either were part of DGG or they recognized it because Destiny was so politically active. He was one of the few content creators who actually cared about real world activism. It was a consequence. I became familiar with them, and then I canvassed with them in April. It was late March of 2023 in your state, in Wisconsin, to get Justice Janice Protasevich elected. And that happened, thank God. And so, but now at this point, the only stuff I do with them, I worked with them pretty closely for relatively closely for 6 months. And then it just, the regularity of the interactions, just because I put out 6 videos a day, my cup runneth over. And so now the only things I do with them, they sent me to the DNC. They invited me out there like, hey, do you want to go do this and interact with people? Hell yeah. And I think I might be doing something with them in October in maybe it's also Wisconsin. It's Milwaukee. Yeah. So, you know, to do canvassing. But other than that, no. All of like that, the extent to which that they are useful for door knocking and real world activism, like offline stuff, that's great because they have the connections and they know people and they know the strategies for door knocking. No, you want to do this neighborhood and you want to use this app and you want to do this stuff.
Right,
They're great for stuff like that. But otherwise, no, baby, it's all me, unfortunately, which is part of the reason why I have bags under bags under bags, because I do all my research, all my recording, all my editing, the SEO, the thumbnail, all of it's me, no editors. And that's a lot when you're putting out 6 videos a day. So, but yeah, as far as like the overall thing about independent media, like, honestly, man, I think that's, again, we operate under heuristics. Like, we trust as a general principle institutions, just because I think it's like, it's an adaptation thing. We would just go insane if there was nothing on which we could depend. Like, if every time we got in a car, we were in the throes of a panic attack thinking, oh my God, I am not a mechanic. Some auto manufacturer put these brakes in. I'm rolling the dice.
Yeah,
it's a coin flip. Right. Like, we would just cease to be as a species. So I think like we are just evolutionarily predisposed to trust iterative things and institutions. So it's easy for people to say Fox or CNN or MSNBC because they have brick and mortar and they have decades behind them and they have the suits and the sets and all the things and the connections. Alternate media doesn't really have that. And so I think as a general principle, you should probably be more skeptical of alternate media, of YouTubers and stuff like that than you would, you know, professional journalists, which you can't trust anything. And it's impossible to learn. I think at the end of the day, you also just have to be self-aware enough to say, okay, like in the case of the tenant media thing, well, they're being really weirdly flattering towards a hostile foreign adversary and pretty fucking uncritical. Like basically you have to have a degree of self-awareness to like question these things and enough epistemic humility to realize that nobody should be blindly trusted, myself included. That's why I tell people, like, when they're like, oh, thanks for the reporting. I'm like, I'm not a reporter. I'm not a journalist. I'm a political commentator. I'm a guy with a political science degree who interprets and analyzes the reporting that professionals do. And I give my opinion.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's the other thing too. I would say I love the support that I get from my audience, but I also, like, I don't have a community. This is the other thing. I made a personal choice. I don't have a Discord. I don't have a subreddit. It's probably going to screw me over when election season dies because I don't have a community. I have viewers. I want it to be transactional. I want them to pop in, listen to what I have to say. If they agree, let me know. If they disagree, let me know, and then move on and hang out with friends and family and other stuff. But yeah, I think that I think you should just have a healthy degree of skepticism from all corners of alternate media. I have a question for you all. Yeah, because I thought I recall either in the email or something, it was a different email. Did you have different opinions on the Supreme Court or stuff like that? Or
you're a big Supreme Court reform guy. I'm definitely not. So totally disagree on that.
What the F? After all this, the Osho bros betray me at last. They reveal their true colors. What do you mean?
You're extreme. You're extreme when it comes to Supreme Court reform. And it's just to suit your political aims. And I think it's short-sighted, nearsighted, is only going to suit you in the short term and then bite us all in the butt as the Supreme Court is destroyed for
I'm sorry, eternity. I couldn't hear you over your 6'3" conservative supermajority and the privilege that comes with it. I couldn't hear you over that. I'm sorry. Damn you. How dare you try to disadvantage me, says the advantaged party. No, listen, full disclosure, putting cards on the table. Did you watch, it was either yesterday or the day before, the WIC panel with Destiny and and Lactoid and Pisco.
I watched part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was really instructive in the sense that, I do like, do you know who like Lactoid? Have you guys had conversations with him or anything like that? I pick on Lactoid a lot because I like Lactoid, and teasing is a love language of mine. And he's a smart guy, and he is a really good debater. He'll debate just about anything. My God, it seems like all he does is live on debate panels. But I do think he's full of shit, and I think most people are when they say that they're principled originalists, or they're principled this, or they're principled that. I think at the end of the day, yeah, we all are to one extent or another outcome oriented. I'll give you an example. So I use Lactoid. Lactoid will tell you, of course I'm not partisan. There are times when this version of the court does things I don't want, and I put up with it. See how principled I am. It's like, yeah, but more often than not, it's kind of like you say.
Hey, real quick, I hold the thought. Seth, pick up your mic. It's been driving me nuts. I'm gonna go all the way to Kentucky and beat you. All right, we can continue, Josiah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Fellas. Break it up, fellas. No,
older brother moment. All right, continue with your wrong Supreme Court rant.
That's okay. You complained about his microphone. I need you to check your headset because something was clearly going on there. I was not giving you a wrong Supreme Court rant, sir. You should have been hearing the God's gospel truth leaving my lips about the Supreme Court. There's clearly something going on with your headset, but no. We're all outcome oriented, and even those who say that they're principled nonpartisans and that they can point to times that the Supreme Court has deviated from what their preferences are, was because that generally speaking they get what they want, right? It's like saying, that I'm really not. There's no real special affection towards my wife, because sometimes my wife does things I disagree with. Yeah, but more often than not, she doesn't, right? So on the aggregate, you still get what you want for the most part. Right. I don't believe Lactoid would be saying this if it were a 6-3 liberal court. I think he would be like, yeah, I have questions about the court's legitimacy. I have questions about the court's composition. And of course, this is a counterfactual that we can't test because we've had a conservative majority on the court for 50 years. And we're going to have a conservative majority on the court for at least another decade or two. But no, I have seen no evidence whatsoever that the people who say that the court is legitimate in its current iteration, it's fine in its current iteration, have anything other than the motivations I just described, where more often than not, or on the things that matter to them, they get what they want. The Supreme Court is not perfect. It's not divine. It's an institution. And here in America, though we should generally trust our institutions should also work to earn our trust, right? I'm not obligated, nor is the Supreme Court entitled to my blind devotion. It's transactional. It's like, hey, you want me to trust you? I need to be open to trusting you. You're right. But you actually need to do things to merit my trust. So, for example, Justice Thomas, with all of those undisclosed gifts, if he really cared about people being really upset with him, and the polls show that they are, what he should do is say, you know what, guys? I'm not God. I'm not a God. I'm not a philosopher king. I'm not entitled to your blind trust, particularly when I've done things to make you legitimately question. Is it like a relationship? Are either of you in relationships?
Yeah. We're both married.
Yeah. Both married. If you're, oh, I hope they're watching right now. Put you on the spot. The truth is, if your wives did anything to cause you to doubt their trust, or excuse me, let me put it like this. Your wives come to you and they say, Seth, Josh, I'm having some trust issues. You would never say, STFU, trust me anyway. You would hear what they have to say, and you would actually probably modify your behavior to encourage more trust from them. They have to be willing to trust you, but you have to take their concerns seriously and act in ways that deserve their trust. The current Supreme Court doesn't do that. The current Supreme Court says, yeah, one of our justices has millions of dollars in undisclosed gifts. But you know what? We're not obligated. We're not really obligated. Ethics requirements and that's for other people. Those are other judges. Those are for Congress. Those are for it's like for presidents and shit. We can just do it. No. Yeah. And my philosophy is no, fuck you. You either you will modify your behavior to earn my trust, or I'll use brute political power and we'll pack the court with people I do trust. Either way, I'm going to win. You can't convince me that that's a bad attitude to have. You would actually say, no, yeah, Justice Thomas, nah, bro, that's pretty sketchy shit. You should fall on the sword, admit what a piece of shit you are, and adjust your behavior accordingly.
I mean, even keeping with your marriage, let's go with the marriage analogy, right? Because I think it works here, Jessiah. You look at a marriage, right? Let's say you're married to Justice Thomas, and instead of divorcing Justice Thomas, you're attacking the entire institution of marriage. Don't you think you're overstepping? Why don't we just impeach Justice Thomas?
No, because in this metaphor, the institution of marriage is, I'm not talking about other people's marriages. I'm talking about the institution of marriage between Justice Thomas and I. I'm not attacking other state Supreme Courts or other judges. I am attacking the relationship between Justice Thomas and I in this metaphor. Justice Thomas has poisoned the trust, and not he alone. I would argue Alito has as well. Thomas is the most egregious, but he has acted in a consistently untrustworthy way. And when Democrats have gone to him reasonably and saying, hey, can you explain this? Hey, are you willing to talk about this under oath? Hey, can we investigate this? Not, we're going to court pack the shit out of you, like reasonable stuff. Thomas has given them the finger every time. And so it would lead to a divorce in this metaphor. If your spouse, had these irreconcilable differences where there were trust issues and one or both of you were unwilling to modify your behavior accordingly, and the one who did propose reconciliation was rebuffed time and time again, saying, no, I'm going to do the things that cause you to not trust me. You're just going to have to trust me anyway. Get over it. That would inevitably lead to divorce. It would. And so my position is that I see no reason why not to reform the court. What am I missing?
Again, I think you're going too far. I think court packing, it presents other dangers. Okay.
Oh, so your beef is court packing. Wait. So your beef
my big beef is court packing. So example is like Biden's Supreme Court reforms that he suggested. I would vote for those if I was in office.
Okay, cool. Okay, sure.
Yeah. So that I think that is a compromise to the extreme that I've heard you propose before, which is court pack. It's already a majority. I think that forever destroys the Supreme Court, and it's going to be used against you even worse. It's going to be used against you even worse, Josiah, because we just talked about earlier. I'm getting animated because I like the Supreme Court. I like the institutions.
Do it. I know.
We just talked about we are a coin flip away from Donald Trump winning again, and you're talking about court packing.
So
what's to say Trump wins and he throws? Now you have a 9-0 court.
Jessiah of Pondering Politics, like and subscribe, am talking about court packing. But President Biden's not. Chuck Schumer's not. The vice president's not. The vice president mentioned court packing 5 years ago. She has not officially made that part of the Harris-Walz campaign, nor do I expect that she would, even if she really wants to. I expect that she wouldn't propose that because it's seen as, yes, the most extreme of the court reforms. But let's be clear. The court's changed. Like here's my thing, and I'm not going to project my frustrations with my boy Wick onto you and others, but a couple of things. Number one, the Constitution not only doesn't provide for the composition of the Supreme Court, the only member of the Supreme Court the Constitution mentions is the Chief Justice of the United States. Did President Washington break the court by adding more than just a Chief Justice? No, of course not. Did President Adams break the Supreme Court? He's our second president. Did he break the Supreme Court by reducing the size of the Supreme Court when he lost his reelection to President Jefferson. It was pure political calculus. He didn't want Jefferson's party to have an outsized influence on the court, so he shrank the number of seats on the court so that Jefferson wouldn't be able to fill vacancies. Now, Jefferson wins the presidency, his party takes power, and they were able to undo what Adams did. But even the founding fathers not only changed the size of the courts, they used it for even political reasons. So I just want to say this. I'm not saying that you have to change your mind on this, but I want to be very clear. If anybody tells you that the founding fathers, well, they thought that the United States Supreme Court was going to be an apolitical, my God, these guys were going to be androids. No, even the founding fathers used the Supreme Court as a football. And the court changed size multiple times throughout its history. And it's basically been 9 justices since the end of the Civil War. But even that's dictated by federal statute. It's perfectly legal, perfectly constitutional, and perfectly commensurate with American history. Our noble founding fathers in the rich tradition of weaponizing a court for political reasons. It happens. Then we get to the current state of the court. I'm fine in theory not packing the court, but I need you to give me something to punish Mitch McConnell for doing what he did, because I would argue, as Pisco argued, as Destiny, thank God, is finally there. He packed the court too. He didn't expand the court, but he packed it. He broke norms. He broke traditions. Then he broke his own new norms and traditions purely in a brute force display of politics. And this is where it gets to game theory. If you and I are playing a game, Josh, you seem like a nice guy, but eventually, if you were forced to play the game, like you couldn't just leave, right? It's not chess. You have to play. You have to sit there and play every damn day.
Yeah.
But I violated the rules. Eventually, you'd start violating the rules too. And I couldn't say a damn thing to you. Josh, how dare you violate the rules? You would say, Jessiah, I'm not obligated to take the ass kicking every time you want to change the rules because you don't think you can win a fair fight. I use other metaphors too. To me, it's also like the principle of self-defense. Not to use, again, colorful metaphor, but I'll use a bar fight as a metaphor. The Republicans, when it comes to the court, in my opinion, I'm a short guy. I'm a little guy. I'm like 5'8", okay? Decent shape, but I'm a small guy. And I am not a violent person. I am the kind of person to run away from a fight. Never been in a bar fight. I've seen a few.
You can find Seth.
No, probably not. Listen, I'm 33.
Like 6'3", respectfully.
Yeah, I'm basically like, oh, dude, I'd bite your freaking ankles. Like, you have no idea. Like a chihuahua.
That's a softie, man. That's a softie.
But actually,
he doesn't have a beard.
Get out of here.
This is actually a really good metaphor. So imagine then, Seth and I are in a bar. And let's imagine that instead of being a giant weenie, which is what I am, let's imagine that I have a real mean streak in me. And let's imagine I'm drinking and I get drunk and I get mean and I start picking a fight with Seth, banking on Seth's good nature, not striking back. You would never say that Seth is obligated to just take it if I break a beer bottle and start stabbing at him. Oh, Seth, you're the bigger guy. You just got to get lacerated to death, or you just have to keep retreating. You would eventually say, Seth, it's okay for you to grab Jesiah's wrist, overpower Jesiah, disarm Jesiah, and tell Jesiah if he doesn't stop, you're going to break his wrist. And if he doesn't stop doing that, you're going to do more. Now, I use that purely just as a metaphor because usually self-defense really, really connects with people.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue the principle applies here. I'm not obligated. Democrats are not obligated to just suffer at the mercy of Republicans. So if you say, Jesiah, don't pack the court, then I say, Josh, that's fine. But I need you to do something to disarm the Republicans. And if you can't come up with something, well, then court packing, as far as I'm concerned, is still on the table. If you can convince the Republicans, Mitch McConnell, to get down on his knee and or shell, because he's a tortoise, and beg for forgiveness, say, oh, I was such a monstrous piece of shit, morally inferior to any Democrat who has ever lived. I am so sorry. We will never do it again. As a matter of fact, we are signing in blood we are forfeiting 3 future Supreme Court justices to make it right, to make it whole, then we'll talk. But otherwise, what it sounds like to me is you're saying, no, you're obligated to just keep taking it. That doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. And I understand that there are risks. I want to be clear about this. I get that there are risks, as there are risks in anything. There's a risk that if we reform the court or look at the court or criticize the court, that Republicans will lose their bananas. That's possible. But they've already done it. To me, it's again, it is like telling an abused spouse not to block her husband's strike because he's just going to hit you harder the next time. We would never do that. We just would never, ever do that. And so that's why I resist on principle. Republicans will do what Republicans want to do. It's not a turn-based RPG. They don't need me to pack the court before they do something else to the court when it's convenient for them. And so if you don't like where we are, then instead of lecturing Democrats about court packing, you should turn to Republicans and be like, look where you and you alone brought us.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. But also, somebody eventually does have to fall on the sword and figure out without destroying the institution. And a great example, I like the bar fighting example. It's cute. But I think a better example is presidential term limits, right? A better example.
Yeah.
It is totes adorbs. But a better example is presidential term limits. We had this normalcy that Washington created, 2 terms. And I feel like, Jessiah, your arguments, you'd be saying, in order to keep Republicans out of office, I'd rather have no term limits. Why? But what was created was the normalcy that it was arbitrary. It wasn't constitutionally there until we amended the Constitution to have the 2 term limits. But because of a pragmatic analysis, they were like, let's do 2 terms. There was obviously exceptions to that. Sure. But again, you know what I'm saying? Like from a presidential perspective.
I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I do. So and that's why I'm hoping you can clarify, because President Roosevelt broke President Washington's 2-term
norms
precedent. Yeah. And then it was eventually enshrined into law in the 22nd Amendment. But that the norm was broken, not even necessarily in bad faith, but I mean, as somebody, I think FDR was the 3rd best president we ever had, but I agree he shouldn't have been president for 4 terms. And so I think the 22nd Amendment and a 2-term limit is a good idea. I suppose it could be 3, probably not 1, because I think 1 term is too short for any president to enact their agenda. So 2 seems about right. And I'm generally deferential to Washington because he's my favorite president. But that had really nothing to do with partisanship. Like, it wasn't like what happened was after FDR.
Back then. But it was a norm that was established. Back then, it wasn't necessarily party. I mean, obviously, party politics played in a matter, but it was a norm and an institution that they created because they respected the norm that was arbitrary. And I think we're in the same scenario where the 9 justices has been a norm, and someone has to say, let's either enshrine this or let's.
Well, it is enshrined
because who cares?
Well, wait a minute. It is both. It's both a norm and a law. I mean, the composition of the court's dictated by federal statute. It's a law that the Supreme Court. It's not a constitutional amendment, but it's a law and it's a norm. But the difference is, term limiting presidents, even though it was a constitutional amendment, was relatively easier because you weren't taught the reason that the court would need to change now, and that I'm advocating for changing the court now, is because we don't get to make up for what the Republicans did. See, with presidential term limits, presidents prior to the 22nd Amendment who wanted to run for a 2nd term or for a 3rd term and 4th term still had to win elections, right? And it was still for only 4 years. And then they had to go back for re-election. That's not really analogous to what we have with the Supreme Court because the norm and the law caps it at 9. When Mitch McConnell had the opportunity in with what he did with Merrick Garland and Justice Gorsuch, and then again with Amy Coney Barrett in 2020, it's almost like he broke the key off in the door on his way out, right? There's no way for us to address it. It's not like in 4 years. It would be, listen, it would be bad, but it would be totally tolerable. McConnell screwed us for 4 years, but you know what? In 4 years, then we get to have our 3. Then we could be made whole. It would be a relatively easy thing, but that's not what happened. What happened is he screwed us for decades, and may screw us yet again, because here's the reality. Trump could win the election. Republicans could win. They're favored to win the Senate. It's a coin flip if they take back the presidency. Thomas and Alito could retire given their age, and Trump could appoint 2 more justices. Furthermore, let's say Vice President Harris wins the presidential election, but Republicans take the Senate. If there's a Supreme Court vacancy with a Republican Senate, why would we ever assume that they'd let us fill it? We have no reason to believe that. That's the difference. I take your point that a norm was broken with term limits for the presidents, and it had to be codified into law because we're like, no, we don't want to go down this road. But it's different with the Supreme Court because there is no way to correct this without breaking the norm again. There was a way to correct what happened with presidential term limits. That's where it's not analogous to me.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be again say you're overcorrecting with the court packing. We probably have some shared agreement with the ethics with the ethics code and the potential term limits. We probably would share some agreement. But again, the big fight would be, I think, court packing is terrible.
But the thing is, I'm least married to court packing. But my question is, I'm a firm believer in again making things whole. Reparations. It's a dirty word, but I like it. I think reparations here are in order in the sense that if you don't want to give me 3 more justices, I want you to give me something of equal value that advantages me and screws you, since you screwed me and advantage you.
Right.
So like even codes of conduct, like that's not making me whole. That's I kind of screwed you over, but I tell you what, I'm not going to go kick this puppy. No, you shouldn't kick puppies, right? That should just be a general principle. I want codes of conduct for liberal justices too, not just conservative ones. So what are you going to do? Are you going to guarantee, like, hey, listen, we're going to keep it at 9 justices, but we're going to take a blood oath or whatever, the legal equivalent of a blood oath, saying that the next 3 vacancies, under Republican president, if it's a Republican president, there's a Supreme Court vacancy, I signed a blood oath, so I'm going to turn to AOC and be like, hey, who do you want on the court? I have to give up my ticket. I'll appoint whoever you want. What are you going to do to make us whole? And the only way I see to do that is expanding the court to compensate for the imbalance that was created by bad faith Republican shenanigans. If you have an alternative approach, I'm cool with that. But I just don't know what it would be.
I would have to think more. But I think fighting with fire is typically a general principle. Everybody burns. So I would ask
more fire.
Like a good example. And we would agree that to some level, political gamemanship is involved in multiple different levels, and our system is flawed in different ways. So a good example of this is gerrymandering. Mm-hmm. So with your logic, I'm thinking because Democrats and Republicans both gerrymander, Republicans are going to say, let's just do away with these. Let's do away with these arbitrary lines because they're unfair. The Democrats gerrymandered this. We're just not going to respect that. I think in similar manner, this type of thinking is why Republicans, this gamemanship, are feeling like they're cheated, and it's for flawed reasons. But I would argue that your court packing thing is flawed as well. That's what leads them to anti-denying elections is the same thing. They feel like it's a gamemanship thing. And I feel like they're attacking such inherent institutions with such short-sightedness.
Yeah, but here's the thing. This is what I go to. This is where I go. I'm not saying that you're not wrong. I guess I've accepted that is part of it. And I'm just and the goal is just to win, because here's the other thing. Like
doomerism. That sounds like doomerism.
No, it's not. No, it's not doomerism. It's not doomerism. Doomerism is this is the way it's going to be and we're going to lose. If this is the way it's going to be, I just think Democrats just have to play the game like Republicans. Republicans have so many advantages, and one of them is that Democrats, generally speaking, are not as ruthless, which is why they get they shit their pants when we even gesture in that direction, right? You know, basically what Democrats need to say is, hey, listen, politically, you can either take your chances with us in a fair fight, or if you're going to fight unfair, we're going to fight unfair, and you're going to lose that one too. So it's like, pick your poison, right? Republicans are, again, going back to that bar fight metaphor, they're banking, just like the evil drunk Jessiah in this metaphor would be banking on Seth not finally losing his patience and kicking my ass. I don't believe in rewarding that. You could make the argument, Josh, that simply by Democrats running for office, we risk Republicans acting in bad faith, right? I could make that argument pretty easily. I'm like, hey, Democrats are here, so we're going to have to shore up our advantages. Should, for the sake of civility and civics, maybe Democrats just shouldn't run for office, because, my God, it could provoke Republicans into doing bad things. Maybe we should just toss them the keys. You know, me having a nice house might provoke somebody to try to break into it. I shouldn't live here. I should buy it for them, because then they just might, otherwise they might be tempted to break in. Let's just cut out the middleman and toss them the key. You would eventually say, no, okay, yeah, fuck you. It doesn't matter if this provokes you into a bad faith attack. Your bad faith is irrelevant. I can't give everything. And that's just where I am. We just draw the line at a different place. I think you think that Democrats have more to give to Republicans in the hope that it triggers some sort of grand epiphany. I don't want to misrepresent your views. Maybe you would not characterize it that way, but that's how it comes off to me. Like, hey, listen, I just need you to give a little bit more, and maybe we can knock some sense into them. I just don't believe that that's the case. And I believe that Republicans should start giving to Democrats. I look at any other situation in life, and I think we're all transactional creatures in the sense, again, going back to marriage. It's never, you shouldn't be keeping score in marriage, but everyone has a rough approximation in a relationship of who's doing more, who's depositing in the love bank more than withdrawing, right? And maybe that's a cynical approach, but it's just how human beings are. And that's what kills relationships, as a matter of fact, very often when one person feels that they're giving consistently more than they're getting, and it ultimately kills the relationship. And the romance is dead between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I would argue it's because Democrats give more and Republicans take more, and that's just not tenable. So I'll leave the Supreme Court thing here, which is, and you can have the final word on it. Summation is, it's an institution. It was supposed to be the weakest of the three branches, not the most powerful. Number three, the size of the Supreme Court has changed multiple times in U.S. history, including by the founding fathers and including for openly partisan reasons. The court is packed. The court is not expanded, but it is packed. And it was packed for cynical reasons with cynical tactics. And everybody has their limits, man. Every party has their limits. I'm telling you, the other thing, I guess the last thing I'll say is you're young conservatives. There are young progressives out there who are pissed, and they're going to keep getting pissed. And it will be incumbent on the future leaders of the Republican Party, which will be you and other people like you, to make things whole and go, yeah, we're going to have to throw the progressives a bone. We're going to have to give them something to make things whole. Otherwise, when progressives do take power, it's going to be punitive. I think it will be punitive in the sense that they're going to go for broke, expand the court, Puerto Rico, DC, expanding the House, get rid of the Electoral College. And by the way, I love all this. I'm hyped. I'm getting myself excited just thinking about my heart's going pitter patter. But yeah, it's going to cause that sort of like extreme response, and you might be able to prevent it by giving just a little bit.
I think that's a great place to end. I know Seth's got an early morning working at a coffee shop.
Good,
Seth, I want to give you the final word, because I feel like Jessiah and I were being political nerds, and Seth, you are the great philosopher. And you were used in an analogy, Seth. So maybe you have some choice words in this bar example.
Well, yeah, I guess like the way I see, I guess maybe I'm a little bit more like idealistic when it comes to politics rather than the gamemanship. Because when I hear conversations like this, where I'm not quite as well read up on the Supreme Court, I've kept up with it as well. When I hear stuff like this, for me, it would be to try to fix it within the parameters that it still has been enforced, if that's possible. So whether that's impeachment or making it so that there are just enforced investigations to keep our justices transparent and honest. So yeah, that's
makes sense. I understand. Like you ideally would want to work within the rules before having to change the rules. I get it. I and we just probably disagree. I think at this point, we're at the point where the rules have to be changed. But that's just where we draw the line. At the end of the day, we agree that there is a line, and I draw it in a different place than the two of you, and you each might draw it in a different place from one another. But yeah, folks, guys, I do appreciate you inviting me on. And I know we disagree on Twitter. And again, I'm kind of sad that you sprung the fact that you interviewed Paul. Was just a real douchebag. That guy.
I'm gonna clip only that part.
Please do. If nothing else, what we should have done is we should have just done a bit where I just like shut the camera off and leave as soon as you say that. But yeah, he just there's still time. There's still time for you to delete that video, by the way.
I wanted to speak to this actually because Paul gave us a quest. He gave an analogy that we're in a video game, Seth and I. We're new to the political, whatever we are, political influence space, okay? And Paul was our first feudal lord who gave us a quest. And his quest was for us to destroy Christian fundamentalism or whatever, because we're not as fundamental as Paul, like, or whatever, because we're arguing side tangent. But he gave us that quest. So for you, Jessiah, as our second feudal lord, potentially wiser, potentially more powerful, what quest would you give the Obros?
Whoa, because Paul might watch this shit. Let's be very clear. None of that is potential. He's a minor lord on some infertile tract of land. I
shekels on the gold dollar.
Yeah. I am the fucking archduke of his region. He is unbelievable. Don't you ever suggest that. I'm sorry, you were saying?
Any quest for the Obros I
think you should continue. No, I don't have anything so specific other than to say, I like sparring with you guys on Twitter. This was a fun conversation. I think you should continue to have conversations like this. I'll tell you that people like Destiny, very few and far between, but willing to have conversations with smaller content creators, how I got started, and keep doing this with more regularity. I think you should show up on panels too, like get out there, and show people a different side of the right and say, hey, listen, we really do hold true to our principal beliefs. We're not going to become pro-choice, right? Simply because Donald Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, but also we do acknowledge that situation. And yes, we will stand the Supreme Court and resist court packing calls. But again, we also recognize we kind of screwed you guys. Like, I just feel like there's a nuance here to the conversations you two are willing to have, and a chillness. My quest with you would just be, to the extent that you're able, actually pursue this. And you might be surprised where it takes you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jessiah, for joining. Yeah. Looking forward to sparring more on Twitter and any future conversations or panels that we appear on. But yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, fellas. You all have a good night.
Take care. See you too. Bye-bye. I had to end the stream.